Once again, I'm back, and hopefully this time we're going to have Dr. Lucia on. So I'm going to invite her in a second. Hi, everyone. Good to see you all. So as I mentioned, we're going to talk about epigenetics and how they influence our genes and turn our genes on and off. Our lifestyle choices, what we eat, how we sleep, our stress management, all of these can impact our genes and how they behave. So it's not about what we inherit, but how we express it. This is very important message for today. Let me see if I can find Dr. Lucia now. There we go. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Bahar. Very happy to be here with your community.
Great to have you here. Amazing. So, Dr. Lucia, it's great to have you here today, and we can't wait to hear you and your work. I was just telling everyone about your work and that you're a leading researcher at Stanford University, and how your work is helping to revolutionize how we think about genes, how we think about health, aging, and disease prevention. So tell us about yourself. What are you doing and your work?
Yes, I will give you a little introduction and then I want to hear about your community. I want to understand who's the audience so I can make sure to deliver the most relevant information. So I am Lucia. I am originally Italian, but I left Italy almost 20 years ago. I've been researching and teaching in the field of epigenetics for over 17 years. Started in Italy, then moved to Vienna in Austria, then Oxford, and finally landed 10 years ago at Stanford University, where I've created the first course in epigenetics for professionals. I'm also teaching undergraduate and graduate students at Stanford about this revolutionary science that teaches us how we can leverage simple daily actions like eating, exercising, even meditation, so stress management techniques to change the way our genes work. So not the genetics is the sequence of our DNA. Epigenetics comes from the Greek root epi, which means on the top. So epigenetic modifications are molecular tags that lie atop our genes and can turn them up or down, on or off, just like a dimmer switch modulates the brightness of light in a room. So you can think of your genes, your genetics, as the hardware of a computer, while your epigenetics is the software that tells your genes which your cells, which programs or genes to run. So my specialty is nutrition. I have been involved I've been leading actually the epigenetic analysis of the largest randomized clinical trial ever undertaken to compare a low carb and a low fat diet for weight loss. This trial is called the Diet Fit Study, with over 600 people involved, men and women.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, I've been involved in several projects, especially on nutrition at Stanford. I'm also very passionate about education in general. So I mentioned from lay people, just to inspire people. I think the main message, my tagline is rewrite your genes. And what I mean by that is that because we can, these epigenetic modifications are actually shaped but by what we do every day. And all these signals like eating, exercising, even unfortunately bad signals like pollution can send signals to enzymes, proteins that write or erase these epigenetic tags on our genes, thus shaping gene expression in response to what we do every day. So the bottom line is you can rewrite your genes every day, not the sequence, not the genetics, but the instructions on those genes. And this is powerful because it makes the whole difference if you can turn a bad gene off and a good gene on, right? It's not about which genes you have. In most cases, the genetic conditions, especially the one due to one gene, are very rare. Most diseases are due to an interaction between many, many genes and the environment that is mediated by epigenetics. So I here on social media, I'm not very active, but I'm happy to be here. And actually it's an opportunity for me to speak again to the lay audience. I want to inspire people to rewrite their genes and reimagine their life. But I'm also, as you know, we met at the A4M, so the American Anti-Aging Medicine Conference. And so I'm also passionate about teaching clinicians about the science of epigenetics, because only if we have forward-thinking clinicians who can embrace epigenetics in their practice, I can say I'm successful because my ability to teach people is multiplied if you embrace this and teach this to other people. So I am currently working on a CME course for clinicians in epigenetics. I want to make it the best course in epigenetics focused on nutrition, teaching practical tips on how clinicians can empower their patients to change these epigenetic marks through joyful actions like eating. I have on my website, drlucia.com, I have a page where you say course, and the page now is geared toward the general public, but this will be a course for clinicians. So if there are any clinicians and you like this conversation today, just sign up for the wait list and you will be notified when the course launches.
Amazing. That's great to know. Yes, we're all for it. Absolutely. Everything. It's about a very powerful message for everyone about genetics, and it's not what we inherit, but how we express it. I think this is a very important message that you can change the expression of genes. You have the ability and the power, and this is very hopeful, I think. A great message for everyone. So what are the most powerful influences on epigenetics in our environment?
Everything can affect our epigenetics, from diet, exercise, environmental factors and chemicals, like, for example, even pesticides, microplastics, stress, and also social connections. These are very important factors that can all influence our epigenetics. Now, many people ask me, where do I start, right? Because there is all this, I mean, everything influences epigenetics. Where do I start? I think for most people, diet is the easiest, most effective place to start for many reasons. First of all, because we eat many times a day. I mean, most people eat 2, 3 times a day at least. And so we have more opportunity to shape our epigenetics. Second, because I think diet is the easiest to modify, and this, unfortunately, diet quality has gone down over the past 50 years, so there is a lot to improve, right? So I think for these reasons, I think diet is probably the best place to start for most people. That said, I know that there are, I have friends, colleagues who already have a very good diet, a very good foundation. And then it's about finding your weakest pillar. Like, where do you feel that your life could be improved? Is it about social connections? Maybe you have everything, you are exercising, you are hyper focused on yourself, you are having good nutrition, but then don't have social connections. Then I would focus on that pillar in that case. Or I think something that we should do anyway is to limit exposure to environmental toxicants. We can't eliminate it. So don't stress out, because stress is also bad for your epigenetics. So you don't want to panic. We can't eliminate exposure, but we can minimize it. So, for example, I teach about the epigenetic consequences or negative effects of microplastics and pesticides. These are heavily debated topics, hot topics, because these substances at least are not acutely toxic to us, right? We are not just having any major health consequences just by being exposed short term to these substances. However, studies in mice, in animals, show that these substances can induce epigenetic changes that are permanent and are passed to fourth generation, children, grandchildren, and great grandchildren. So we don't want to panic, but being an epigeneticist, I look at things through another lens, and I want to be extra cautious, right? So I think there are ways to minimize microplastic exposure, not eliminate it. Again, don't panic. But for example, I always tell my students there are 3 factors that really accelerate the release of microplastics into the food or liquid that you are using the plastic for. For example, of course, is heat, right? So never heat up a plastic container in the microwave. Never ever avoid, if you are using a plastic bottle, don't put it in the sun, right? The second is acidity. So acidic foods, lemon, tomatoes. Never ever then put lemon in the water. If you are using a plastic bottle, you are just increasing the leaching of microplastics into the water. And the same thing, tomatoes are very acidic. This is the reason why canned tomatoes are horrible, because the lining of the cans, so it's made of BPA, microplastic. And tomatoes are basically increasing the leaching of microplastic in the tomatoes. And and then the third factor is fat. So for example, if you are, I avoid using, this, it's called saran wrap. So to wrap food with plastic. But if you do it, don't do it with fatty food like avocados that are open, right? It just fat releases microplastics. So again, this you can do, just limit exposure to microplastics. Pesticides is a little more difficult, right? Because even organic foods use some types of pesticides. But anyway, this is just to say limit exposure and focus on diet. And this is where this is the cornerstone of my research and teaching. In the food we eat, there are nutrients that I've called epinutrients. These are nutrients that have been proven to either provide building blocks for these epigenetic reactions or regulate the writer and eraser enzymes that write or erase those epigenetic modifications in our genes. So basically, by eating, you are directly controlling how this rewriting process happens every day. And I've called this approach to nutrition epi-nutrition. So it's not another diet plan. No, it's eating with the new awareness that you are sending signals to our genes. And knowing that, you can select some foods that are particularly rich in these epinutrients and make sure that there are not any imbalances, because different epinutrients have different functions, right? So what are these epinutrients? I usually describe them into two main categories. The building blocks are the metal donors. Metal groups are a type of epigenetic modifications, building blocks for epigenetic reactions. And these are things like folate, vitamin B12, methionine, betaine, choline. They are found in a mix of plant and animal foods. Again, working together. There are B12 and choline are found primarily in animal foods, especially if you want to make sure to cover your needs. And you are going to need to supplement if you are a plant-based person. It's important. And the other betaine, folate, they are found both in animal and plant foods, and so even plant-based people don't have problems covering those needs. The other category is the category of epibioactives, which means these are the nutrients that regulate the writer and eraser enzymes, and these are found primarily in plants, because are those polyphenols that we know, always knew of, and now we know they're actually regulating epigenetic reactions, with the exception of omega-3 fatty acids. So we know omega-3 fatty acids are so important for us, membrane health, but they also have an epigenetic function, regulating the inflammatory genes. So, and they are found primarily in fatty fish, unless you want to supplement with an algae-based product. But in terms of food, is fatty fish. Yes, there are plant-based omega-3s, nuts, chia seeds, flax seeds, but, and I say this loud and clear, those plant foods, plant-based omega-3s are not enough, because they need to be converted in our body into the biologically active EPA and DHA forms that we get from marine-based foods. And that conversion is incredibly slow. It's like 1 to 5%. Okay, you would need to eat kilos of nuts and flax seeds and thousands of calories every day to cover your needs. So just take a fish supplement if you don't eat fish, right? It's they're very good for us, and yeah. So this is for omega-3s. For the other antibiotics, polyphenols are a great example. So think of colorful foods, right? All the colorful veggies and fruit, even coffee, chocolate,
Mhm.
olive oil is my absolute favorite source of antibiotics. Being an Italian, is literally liquid gold when it comes to antibiotics. And those antibiotics in olive oil can turn off inflammatory genes. That's why it's so good for us. And to give you an example, there is some research looking at how much of these polyphenols we need every day, right? And it looks like the more, the better in the research. In Europe, we have an average of 1,000 milligram of these polyphenols every day, which is a lot, but it can be achieved actually easily. For example, I give you an example: coffee and a cup of blueberry in the morning, then a tablespoon of olive oil with some onions or spices. Spices are also very rich in antibiotics at lunch. And then you have a snack with walnuts and cacao powder. And then a dinner again, olive oil again with other veggies, right? It's not impossible, but if you focus on whole foods, you are probably getting, the average good dose, and then the more the better. If you can incorporate those foods, I have the list of foods is very, very long, which is good news. It means that most foods are actually good sources. There are foods that are richer sources. So, for example, I think among vegetables, I really like the cruciferous vegetables. We are talking about broccoli, Brussels sprouts, arugula, even kale. This family of veggies are particularly rich in sulforaphane, one of my favorite antibiotics. It really can turn on your own antioxidant genes. So we all have an obsession with antioxidants nowadays. But it turns out that actually sulforaphane, although it is not an antioxidant, it can turn on our own antioxidant defense gene. And I think this is actually better because sometimes we need so that oxidation, the transient increase in oxidative stress and inflammation is good for us. For example, after training, it it has been shown that taking antioxidant may blunt that adaptive response to training that is mediated by an increase in radical oxygen species and a little inflammation. So taking an antioxidant there wouldn't be good. But when you are actually addressing oxidative stress from the inside out, making sure that you are turning on your own antioxidant factory, that's just a game changer. It's a different approach where you are making actually your body work for you rather than bombarding it with lots of different supplements that may work sometimes or sometimes not so much. So yeah, this was a little very, very, very broad
Wow.
introduction to epi nutrition. I hope that your audience is getting the most out of it.
Yes. Now, how fast these epigenetic can change? This is a very interesting question that comes to even my mind. How fast? Is it
Yeah.
days we're talking, months, years?
Yes, some epigenetic changes are very quickly. We are talking about minutes. These are those that are needed when, for example, we fight an infection. Those changes in gene expression are boom, 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 very rapid. In terms of dietary changes, we have seen that after 6 months, for example, our people, when they lose weight, they start to have significant changes in their epigenetics. There are other studies that looked at 8 weeks, and they've seen significant changes. So my guess is that they're actually very quick. Of course, I think the more important question is not how quick they are, but how to keep the positive change. Because if you have like a crash diet and you have great metabolic and epigenetic changes in 2 weeks, and then you go back, then what's the point? So
Exactly.
basically the message for your audience is, yes, you can change things pretty quickly, but at the same time, you need to stick to your changes to make actually a long-term impact. And this is where, and this is part of my approach to health, I think it's very important to embrace pleasure as a compass for long-term health. What I mean by that is that if we focus on your restriction, right? Okay, I go on this crash diet for 1 month, right? And we don't learn to actually love the process. We don't think about actually changing our lifestyle rather than going on a diet. Okay, changing our lifestyle in a way that we love, so that we want to do it over and over every day. This is the key for sustained epigenetic and health change, because otherwise it's not impossible. And I tell you, like, I mean, I'm Italian, of course, so that's why I think that pleasure is the key. Because especially in Italy, we for example take time to savor our food and enjoy every moment, and this is why we maintain those habits for our life, because we love them. So this is just to say, it doesn't need to be painful. Actually, it needs to be pleasurable. And yes, I'm going. That's why this is another highlight of my approach and my course. I want to empower people to love, to rediscover the joy of being healthy again.
That's amazing. That's great message. So tell me about, what about people? Are people different? Some people more sensitive to these changes, or they're all the same? This is again another interesting question, I think.
Yes, I will address this question. I will need to leave for a meeting. Sorry about that,
I know,
about
I
this question.
know.
Sorry. So you are basically asking whether there are different response
Mhm.
people, whether some people are more sensitive. Okay, the good news is actually that the if you, for example, move from a very unhealthy diet, right,
Mhm.
to a healthy diet, the change is huge. The signal to your writer and eraser enzyme is very strong. This is actually where you see a greater response, right? Imagine I've had like an epi-nutrient rich diet for 10 years, right? If I increase my polyphenol intake of a little, probably I won't see a big change. So the good news is actually that you see the most changes when your baseline is worse. You are starting from a lower point, right? So of course, on the other hand, however, on the other hand, it is true that there are some epigenetic modifications that are sticky. What I mean by that, they are a little difficult to erase, right? There is a little, we call it epigenetic memory. It's almost as if your cells remember being fat, if you've been, for example, fat for a long time, or remember being in another disease state, or remember that you have been a smoker. We know, for example, that there are smoking associated epigenetic marks that take 16 years to be erased. Some of them get erased within 1 year, so that's the good news. And some of them take many more years. So the bad news, if you want, is that there are some sticky marks, and for with overweight, for example, we think that these sticky marks are the reason of the so-called yo-yo phenomenon, like when people that tend to regain weight after losing it, is almost as if those epigenetic marks are setting a baseline for metabolism that the fat cells try to get back to it. But the good news, so this is the bad news. The good news is that the changes are happening, and with if you manage to sustain the change long term, we see dramatic changes. For example, even in our study, I mentioned after 6 months, we saw changes, and these were overweight people. And after 1 year, dramatic changes. So it's not that it cannot be erased. Some epigenetic changes are a little sticky, but again, that's why you need to embrace a lifestyle changes, not going on a strict diet. This is not the solution. Choose health, choose joy, and choose yourself. Love yourself is about really rediscovering self-love. So with epigenetics.
That's an important message. So that's great. Self-love and one simple habit that you can tell the audience today that helps to change the expression. One simple habit. What's the recommendation?
It's different. It's difficult. I would call it whatever is your you know. I give you two habits. Okay, okay. For eating, I think if you think about your plate, you should always have like core of good quality protein that usually comes with the metal donors, right? And then a generous side of veggies with a little olive oil. That is for sure an epigenetics approved meal. For exercise, if you are not into exercise, try exercise microdosing. What I mean by that is that sometimes, for example, I have, when I wake up, I do pull-ups while I'm preparing my coffee. And I do 3 sets, one as soon as I wake up, the first thing, the other one after preparing the machine, and then the third one just before sitting. And I have 3 sets every other day, and it's almost built in my routine. It's not something that, at the end of the day, I need to think, okay, let's go do those pull-ups. And I also, and this is the key, I find it fun when I wake up in the morning and the first thing I do is go hanging on that pull-up bar. You know how I feel? I feel wild, I feel young, and I feel fun and joyful. And that's why I do it every day. Otherwise, life would be miserable. If I say, oh my goodness, you need to go hang for, no, you need to make it like a joyful thing, a game, and you feel strong after that. What a beauty. And that's why I will do it until I can. Nobody's telling me to. So go and embrace long, long term health changes that you enjoy.
Amazing. Beautiful. We loved it. We love to hear you. And hopefully we have you soon here back with us.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much for waiting that long and
Lovely.
for the invitation.
That's
It's been a
great.
pleasure.
Thank you
Bye.
very much, Dr. Lucia. Bye bye, everyone.